wealthier white families made a dash for the suburbs, leaving the inner cities and their schools to struggle with the problems of poverty and violence. Leonard DeFiore is president of the National Catholic Educational Association in Washington, D.C.
Those who are affluent enough choose a school by buying a house in the school district that they think is good for their child. Or, alternatively, they pay tuition at a private school. So lots of people have school choice now. The debate in this country is whether or not the poor, the working poor, the lower middle class, will they have the same opportunity to choose a school for their children as the affluent do. So we're just talking about equity, talking about justice. This is really more a moral issue than it is an educational issue.
White flight to the suburbs almost destroyed the Milwaukee, Wisconsin school system. At last count, nearly 8,000 students were enrolled in 91 private schools throughout the city limits as part of Milwaukee's Parental Choice program. Those educational institutions, including many Jewish, Catholic, Christian, and Islamic schools, received almost $39 million of public funds for tuition payments in the 1999-2000 school year. That's money that would have gone into the Milwaukee public school coffers. Using tax dollars to pay for private education is a concept many find troubling and is the primary reason that a voucher program is one of the most controversial forms of school choice. Bob Peterson, a longtime public educator in the Milwaukee school system, has been active in educational reform for 2 decades.
I agree with the message that the public schools have to change. I disagree vehemently that the way to change them is to take public monies and give them to private schools, which are not held accountable. And we think that publicly funded voucher schools should be under open meeting, open record laws that allows parents and community people and taxpayers to know how their money is being spent.
Milwaukee's voucher plan has withstood several legal battles, while similar programs in other states, including Florida, have been ruled unconstitutional. Most observers believe the United States Supreme Court will ultimately rule on the constitutionality of using tax dollars to fund religious schools. Nobel Prize winner Milton Friedman first suggested vouchers, or tax-financed certificates, as a way to replace the American model of public education in 1955. Although some endorsed his proposal, the idea lay fairly dormant for almost 30 years until mostly conservative politicians and educational reformers revived the plan in the mid-'80s. A decade earlier, many public school systems in urban areas tried to keep families from leaving their districts by designating certain schools as magnets. These schools, which offered enrichment programs or curriculums geared toward gifted and talented students, were originally designed as a way to improve racial balance voluntarily. The magnet schools were often in the neighborhoods with the highest concentration of low-income minority children. But parents whose children were in other schools often sought out the magnet schools because they offered more academically. Howard Fuller is the Distinguished Professor of Education and founder and director of the Institute for the Transformation of Learning at Marquette University.
There's nothing new about choice. People with money have had it all the time. The only thing that's new here is that we're talking about giving low-income parents an opportunity to make choices. And the reality is that if you have money in America, you can weigh a whole variety of alternatives. If you have no money, your alternatives are limited. What we're saying is, it is not just to say to poor parents, you have to stay in schools that do not work for your children, because to allow you to leave would destroy the system. I think that that's an erroneous view, because we're not in this for the system. We're in this for the parents and for the kids. And so from our perspective, all we're talking about doing is expanding the options and trying to give poor parents some opportunity to make choices.
Khadija Askinam used the voucher program in Milwaukee to send her daughter, Alam Elian, to St. Joan Antietam, a private Catholic all-girls high school.
When I'm looking at the good school, I find this one to respect our, our religion and our culture.
Her daughter, Alam, has thrived since moving from public school to St. Joan Antietam.
And you get to feel for what you want. You know, get a taste of this, get a taste of that. So that's what I find good. I want to be an accountant or computer science, around that area, you know, with the math. I love that. But I want to go to college to pursue that.
Judy Gillespie teaches at St. Joan Antietam and has seen how the choice program has created many opportunities for students from diverse backgrounds.
For so many of these students, perhaps too many of these students, education serves a larger role than it used to. We might be the place where they get their only decent meal for the day. We might be the place that they feel safe from 7:30 until 3:30. They don't expect a drive-by shooting. They don't expect physical abuse to be taking place in their presence at school. So my hope would be that educators understand that we need to serve young people perhaps in a way that was different than 10 years ago or 20 years ago. We need to be more loving, and we do need to model for them the kinds of values that we normally would have expected them to be learning at home.
In Milwaukee, volunteers created a privately funded program called Partners Advancing Values in Education, or PAVE, to supplement the publicly funded voucher program. PAVE awards grants covering half of private school tuition for students who are eligible for the federal school lunch program. Dan McKinley serves as the organization's executive director.
It costs money now to become educated, and that's why a lot of low-income families did not have access to this range of schools. They had access to public schools, but if that didn't work out for them, as it often doesn't, they didn't have anywhere else to go. What the choice movement is about is to allow parents to have the same range of choices that other citizens have that have the money to purchase them.
Students who qualify for vouchers must apply and be accepted to the private school of their choice. Some critics say that only the brightest and most serious students, who often come from families who value education, use the voucher program. That leaves the most difficult and most expensive students to educate within the walls of the public school.
See, I maintain that school choice is actually school choice. That is to say, the schools choose. How do they choose? Most voucher schools in Milwaukee don't service children with exceptional needs. Most voucher schools in Milwaukee don't service limited English proficient students. Most voucher schools in Milwaukee won't continue enrolling a student who has severe discipline problems. Those are choices the schools make, the families don't make. And what we're going to find, I think, over time, is a certain population of students who aren't serviced by the voucher schools, the exceptional education students, the limited English proficiency students, and students who, for whatever reason, are having trouble in terms of basically the hard-to-educate students.
Some say comparing voucher schools to traditional schools is impossible and just plain unfair. Attorney Richard Sachs has represented the Milwaukee Teachers Education Association in legal cases that have challenged the privatization of public education.
If we're not playing by the same rules, and we don't have the same protections and the same guarantees for the children, we're not educating the same type of children, and we're not using the same assessment criteria to determine how well the students are progressing from year to year, I don't know how we can determine whether or not this is a sound educational investment or not.
But Milwaukee Mayor John Norquist thinks the city's voucher program has brought new life to the community school system and helped attract newcomers to its urban area.
I really want the city to be a place where education is successful, where it's responsive to the consumer, and in this case that's the parents and the kids. But it's also responsive to the teachers, so that good teaching is rewarded, and good teachers are held in high regard and high demand and are compensated for it and have the kind of freedom and resources they need to get done what they need to get done.
One of the most pressing arguments against publicly funded voucher programs is that school choice is reserved for either the very rich, who can afford to send their children wherever they want, or for the very poor, who qualify for vouchers. The middle class gets lost in the shuffle. Mayor Norquist has advocated doing away with income limitations on the voucher program in Milwaukee. That would mean taxpayers would be supporting public and religious schools, an idea some may find hard to accept.
What's very important for people to understand is people want their children to be educated. And if you can get a good education in the school across the street, that's fine. But if you think in order to get a better education, you need to go to a church school or you need to go to some other type of private school, I say it's in our interests as Americans to allow that to happen.
In many states, parents of all income levels have another educational choice for their children: charter schools.